you start to look at the cost of living in some of those other states, and then you look at ours. I mean, it's dramatic how different it is. And that's a positive. Those are things we should sell.
"40 Years of the Business Journal" is sponsored by Compco and these participating sponsors.
It was a great place to come. There was a lot of activity, and not just restaurants as it is now, which is great. But back then it was thriving retail as well.
Right.
So I never thought twice about where I worked or what I did. And I don't think most people in business today care where their customers come from.
Right.
They're going to deal with them wherever they're at. The media deals regionally because they have to.
Yeah.
That's where their advertisers come from. When we did it with the chambers, it became very tricky, not necessarily because of the businesses that were our members. It became tricky because of the boards that serviced them and the ties that they had to their communities. And that's what made it harder. We had to make it as even as we could, even though there wasn't anything even about the sizes of Niles, Warren, and Youngstown. Either, and once we made the merger, those other chambers had marketing directors, they had director of governmental affairs, they had the same things we did. And it became very, very tricky to work your way through that process. I mean, it's not something I thought about when I suggested it, and we started to, some very open-minded people sitting down talking about it, but it became harder when you had to deal with real people.
Now, before the merger of the chambers, you were involved with another fairly innovative concept at the time, bringing on a dedicated economic development professional through the Regional Growth Alliance, as it was called back then. First you had Pam Stanley, then you obviously had Reed come on board after she left.
Sure. And again, both of those people, Pam, we were lucky to have Pam Stanley because her husband came here to work for the original Valor. Yeah, for North Star Steel. So we were lucky having someone who had experience in economic development come to work for us. And we went out and found Reed and brought him here, and he was a very talented individual that did a great job with the programs, as did Pam. But the chamber didn't have anything involved with economic development. And I had worked my way through the process with Youngstown Sheet and Tube and some of those other entities. And we knew we needed job creation in this valley, and we needed to work at it. We didn't have to back in the 60s. It was easy. Yeah. The jobs were here. People, you had a child that grew up with, didn't want to go to college, they could get work anywhere they wanted to and make good money. Well, that evaporated overnight. And when that did, the chamber had to step up and be involved in trying to create jobs in the valley. I chaired the board of the Port Authority and ended up serving as executive director.
Right.
I was the president of the Better Business Bureau and ended up serving on its board. I was the president of the regional chamber and ended up serving on its board as well. So, I mean, I've done full circle on all three of the organizations. And I have to say that's been fun doing it too, because my perspective is much different. It's like a parent that's involved in their school, and then once their children graduate, you're involved in a different way.
Yeah.
You're more open-minded about it.
How has the area primarily changed over the years?
I think it's grown up. I mean, I think it's, obviously we've seen these all crazy dips in population because simply the families are smaller today. We've lost a lot of the children that have moved out of this valley. I know that it's a big push of the chamber now to help repopulate the valley. I think that's very, very important, to sell what we have, which is a great cost of living. This is a great place to raise your family and do it economically and still have access to all the major markets. And again, I'm a Chamber of Commerce guy. We're 60 miles from Cleveland, 60 from Pittsburgh. Major league sports, restaurants, anything you'd want, we're here. We have a lake. We can get to what we need to do. but we don't have to fight like they do on the East Coast and the West Coast. You know, we have 4 seasons, but they're great seasons. They're not bad seasons. We don't get terrible winters anymore. You know, in our summers, you get a couple days in the 90s, but everything's usually very nice. But the valley has changed. We have more. I think we have a very good manufacturing base. We're starting to see international development here that we didn't have for a lot of years. You know, that was a big gap from an economic development standpoint, and we're seeing it happen now.
When you say international development, what are you talking about specifically?
We're seeing, you know, the companies that are out in Lordstown.
Okay.
You know, what the 3rd largest company in the world is here. You know, I mean, we're seeing some of those things happen. People are looking at this valley to bring their businesses here that never have, and that's really important because we're going to continue to feed off that. We will get more businesses to come here because of what they did, because of what we have. And the more that come here, the more people are going to realize this is a great place to be. From an arterial system, I mean, you have Interstate 80 going cross country, or 76, and you have the turnpike that crisscross here. You know, we're not fighting. I mean, it takes me, as long as it would take me to get to downtown Cleveland, you can't cross Chicago in that time frame. And that's a big deal because we're able to take advantage of what the big cities have to offer, yet come back to this community and still have some great things and some great restaurants and other things. But the cost of living is so good. I mean, the crime rate we always need to work on it, but it's down. It's not problematic. You can walk the streets at night. If I want to walk on the sidewalks around my neighborhood, I could do it at 10 o'clock at night and not worry one bit. We're very fortunate from that standpoint. So how have things changed, George? I think they've certainly changed for the better. I think when the chamber sits down with Eastgate, sits down with the Port Authority, sits down with the Youngstown Foundation, that's a big deal. I mean, because now you're talking about the regional entities sitting at the same table. You know, we started this when Jim Dignan was at the chamber. And, you know, we'd just call him and say, Jim, let's go have a cup of coffee. And we'd go up to Jim Kiddick's office and sit and talk about things.
Yeah.
And they do that now on a very regular basis. And that's important because we're not trying to duplicate what someone else is already doing. You know, back when I first took the chamber, I mean, we were it. And so you're trying to do things that everybody else was trying to do too. I mean, I always remember back then, I was the chairman of the Youngstown Area Arts Council, okay, which was a great organization at its time. The problem is you couldn't get all the arts organizations together because they all wanted to do their own fundraising and didn't want to share.
Yeah.
Well, it was the same with economic development agencies. Once we realized that we could do more together, it's simply easier to do our jobs, and I think the community is going to be the better for it. And I see it happen now with our breaking off from Team NEO and having our own economic development entity in direct contact with Jobs Ohio and Columbus is a very big deal. That is something that we've talked about for a number of years and is very, very important. And couldn't have done it without the cooperation of Jobs Ohio and what they saw up here and how they saw us working together. I mean, they get it. And I think we're lucky that we do too, and we're lucky that we have individuals in those positions, Anthony Trevino being one of them, and Guy Coviello and Jim Kidd, that understand why you have to work with each other. You know, it just allows our budgets to go much farther when we're not trying to do the same thing as someone else. I think that governments need to work more closely together. I think the private sector is already doing it. I think the nonprofits are doing it more than they ever have. Now, though, I think that governments have to take that next step and just try to stay away from the infighting and talk about what can we do together. You know, my thoughts always were, you know, when we're talking to commissioners, as an example, let's pick a couple of really simple things that we know cross county boundaries that they can do together. And they're still struggling with that. Transportation is one of them. You know, you have WRTA, which is a very strong, well-funded organization in Trumbull County, has very little in the way of mass transit, but needs it because I think public transportation is a very important thing. But it hardly makes sense to have one entity with all this money sitting here with not many people in their buses and another county adjacent not being able to take advantage of that. I mean, I think that those are the kind of things that have to happen. And they're more natural. Water is the other part that's natural. You know, you have to share it. MVSD provides water through Niles, Youngstown, and McDonald to almost the whole valley. I mean, that's part of the process. You know, we need to cooperate from that standpoint to make things work. And you know, governments will eventually change. I'm a sitting councilman, and you know, I have been for a number of years. I sat on a board of education for 14 years. I mean, I get why it's important to cooperate. We tried to do a merger when I was on the school board. We ended up working some things out with Liberty School District in terms of property exchanges, some giving people choices as to where they want to go to school if they lived in a certain part. But those are the kind of things you have to do on a much larger scale. You know, we did it on small scales because it made sense. You know, and it's the same thing. It has to happen on a larger scale, and hopefully this new public entity. Again, I'm not even sure exactly what they call the
new Jobs Ohio entity, Lake to River Economic Development.
Hopefully that entity will help with that process, because it is the direct tie both to Jobs Ohio and the governor's office. And, you know, for the local communities that all need state funding to be able to get more of it, hopefully they're going to be able to go through that process.
What's the future hold? What gives you hope?
You know what? I have hope. I have 5 grandchildren that I love. And I mean, so it's very important to me that good things happen in this valley into the future, because I'd love to think that they're going to have a chance to stick around. You know, that's important. You know, when I went to college and went away to college, I never thought I would come back. I did because of family. I did because of friends. And then I realized I liked it here. And I made it my home. My wife is she's from Central Ohio. I met her at college. When she came here, she had never seen this many Italians in one place in her life. You know, wasn't her background. But you know what? When she did, she got comfortable with it. She taught for 37 years and loved every bit of it in a small community. You know, we need to expose ourselves to more people to get them to come here and stay. But we also need to show that we're progressive enough that there's a future for the young people in this valley. You know, especially in today's world, you could work anywhere from home.
Right.
And if you're able to do that, why not live where the cost of living's great? You know, where you could deal with the everyday people, your neighbors on a regular basis, and not be worried about going to sleep at night. You know, being comfortable walking the streets. That to me is what we have to sell to the rest of this country. What is it? 40% of the people live within 5 miles of a shoreline. That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
But you also see that's where most of the movement's taking place. They're leaving California. You know, Florida has got to be an extremely expensive place to live. You know, so it's all changing. You know, you start to look at the cost of living in some of those other states, and then you look at ours. I mean, it's dramatic how different it is. You know, and that's a positive. Those are things we should sell.
"40 Years of the Business Journal" is sponsored by Compco and these participating sponsors.